very distinguished guest this evening, giving us all the information about the Civil War. His name is Dan McCauliffe. He has been the chairperson for the GAR down in Worcester. And if he doesn't know it about the Civil War, it didn't happen. Take it away, Dan.
I want to thank the Historical Society for the invite, and especially for the Senior Center and Dave especially for helping me set up this beautiful screen. I was thinking I was going to use my little thing on the screen, you know. But, oh, I saw that and I got so excited. When I left, they said, I hope you can sleep tonight. So anyways, I was chairperson of the GAR Board of Directors for 14 years. And, that's the Grand Army of the Republic. And they were veterans of the Civil War back then. And it was just like the American Legion is today. And they had a hall. But then, when I became chairperson of it, they sold it. The city sold it because they had to maintain it. So the money that came from the sale of the building went into a fund that we could use only for the artifacts. So which was good. So the city couldn't get their hands on it. All right. So I did 14 years, and then I only supposed to have done 3. But like anybody else who goes, you don't get volunteers anymore. And we had a board of 5, and there was like a board of 3 and a board of 4, and back and forth. But we never had that 5th or 6th person. But we did finally get 5, and then we got 1 more, and that means that I was out. So after 14 years, I was out.
You retreat.
So anyways, I've done this presentation especially during the 150th. I did it in Myrtle Beach and in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, and a lot of towns around this area. Just pretty much the same one. So I'll get started. I want to show you Civil War musket, 58 caliber, and it fired 1 shot. What I'd like you to do, as I'm doing this, is take this little ball and drop it into your fingers. Be sure it hits your fingers, like that, okay? And then to see how it feels, and just from that height, okay? See if you can pass it around, if not, that's fine. So anyways, it fired 1 shot, and the soldiers, before they went into battle, made up a little folder like this, and it had a bullet here on the edge that they had tied up a string, and they put powder about that much after it. And then they folded this up. And that was very important because during a battle, what they did was they took this down a little bit to nothing so that the powder could fall out. They bit it off. And after biting it off, they would put it into their barrel. They take this out and stuff it in. They ram it down so it's nice and tight. Okay. And then, during the battle, you gotta put this back because you're gonna need it for the next shot. We put it down. Take this up, pocket, and then out of another pouch, you take this little cap. Alright, this little cap. And what it is, it's a little piece of tin, looks like a cup, and on the inside of it's got a little bit of powder. And they would put it right here. Right there, just like that. And now the gun is ready to fire. So when you pull the trigger, the hammer comes forward, just like the old cap pistols. Hammer comes forward, hits this, sends a spark down into the chamber, ignites the powder, and off goes the bullet. Right, 1 shot. They said that if you had 3 shots in a minute, you were an expert. statistics at Gettysburg about this guy, and you'll be in awe of those numbers.
Yeah.
Because Gettysburg, of course, was a 3-day battle. So, any place that I've gone, I've always done the research of the town where I'm speaking. So in this case, here I am in Leicester, and Leicester during 1860 had a population of 2,733. And then 200 or 201 enlisted or were drafted. Enlisted, one was drafted. And then 17 killed, 6 died as POWs, 9 diseased, 24 disabled, and so on. 6 deserted. They give them 16% attrition, fatality rate, which is about, and I'll show you these statistics. These are all the regiments that left Worcester. So they did. Now this was towards 63 and early 64, so they didn't see all that much. The 15th was the very first one. The 15th was out of Worcester at June 12th, 1861. The 21st was August 19th, 2 months later, 61. And then 2 months after that, the 25th went out. The regiment consisted of 1,000 men, 10 companies of 100 men each. The 15th, after their 3-year enlistment was up, it was less than 300 of the original 1,000 that came back. They were either, you know. So anyways, these are the soldiers that were killed from Leicester. This is what the regiments that they were on. Every one is a Worcester County regiment, with the exception of the cavalry. We never came up with a cavalry unit. So for some reason, he was really good with a horse. 2 of the men died at the battles that I'm going to be talking about. Roanoke and the other one at New Bern. And they were killed in action or they died of their wounds. This what is interesting is their ages anywhere from 18 to 38. And then what they were, farmers and gun makers, and just ordinary people back then. It's amazing. The people, the 6 men that died in the prison were these gentlemen here. This Mr. Frisbee joined the 12th Massachusetts, and that was out of Boston. So he went from Leicester to Boston to join a unit there. And probably the reason was he had relatives, and they liked to fight together, you know, fight with their cousins, to be together with people. Well, unfortunately, he was captured at Gettysburg. He was 19 years old.
Wow.
And he spent 435 days in prison before he died at Andersonville. I can't believe that he lasted that long.
I was just gonna say, wasn't that one of the worst
That
ones?
was the worst.
Okay.
All told, 13,000 Union soldiers died at Andersonville. And then Florence was another one, and Salisbury. And those are the figures. Now, we weren't without, the North was not without their sins, because they had Elmira. And I visited Elmira, and they were, you know, just as bad, not this bad. But, anyways, so it's pretty, and this is the places where they were all captured. In the prison that they were in, and they died, and the amount of days they spent. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And then, if you look at Leicester compared to a lot of the other towns, they're pretty much on an average, maybe a little bit below average of the amount, but they didn't have the same amount of people as a lot of the other towns did. Worcester, I didn't put Worcester up there, but they were way up there. You know.
Daniel, but if you look at Shrewsbury, less population than Leicester, right? Am I reading that right?
Yes,
And look at their casualty rate.
yes, yeah,
That's,
25%.
that is staggering.
Yeah, it is.
Wow.
Yep. Yep, and that, the casualty rate is, the amount that enlisted, the amount killed, died of disease, and that, anybody who died, not the ones who deserted or went to prison. That's not considered a casualty rate. So, they did their part. Enlisted did their part, like everybody else did. Now we get into the program. These are my flags, right? My wife said that I was a Confederate in my other life. Not because I was an advocate of slavery, don't get me wrong, but I admired the South for what they did for so long, for what they had. You think about it, 4 years they fought hard, right? And they gave up a lot, and you'll see that later on also. But these are the flags that were captured at New Bern by the Worcester units, the 21st and the 25th. And a lot of the Leicester soldiers were in these regiments. Fort Thompson flag. This was the garrison flag. This one was in the center of the battlefield. And then the Freedom of Victory flag. This is the Texas Star. I don't know what the meaning of that was. But you know, when the South broke away from the Union, they were all Americans. And they wanted to be considered Americans. They didn't want to lose the flavor of being not American. So they created their flags in the image of the United States flag. The stars and stripes, okay? But what happened was, in the early part of the war, especially Manassas, if you put one of these flags on a flagpole, there was no wind. It looked just like the American flag. You couldn't tell them apart. And there's been stories, especially during the Battle of Manassas, that Union troops got disorganized, ran to Confederate units, regiments, because they saw the flag and they thought it was an American flag. That was not a good idea. Okay? So what happened was they went and they took the stars and bars, and it was actually a naval flag that this looks exactly like it, but it was only square. Okay, and they stretched it, and that now became their battle flag. And of course, that's got a terrible rap over the years. Anyways, that's another story. So, my story tonight concern of the flags is going to be in New Bern. And then the bell is going to be in Plymouth. And then my heroine is anywhere from the entrance to Cape Hatteras to Roanoke Island, and finally to New Bern. Now this whole idea was part of Winfield Scott's Anaconda plan. And what his plan was to encircle the South and choke it. Okay, so that's why they blockaded anything out there. So the snake went around the ocean, up the Mississippi River, and over. And that was his plan. And the Burnside expedition was part of that. And what's really amazing about this is that after the Battle of Roanoke and New Bern, the Union occupied it for the entire war. It was only 1862, and it was 3 more years of war, and yet they were south of Richmond, 200 miles, and they stayed there. The Confederates, they put a little up against New Bern, but it wasn't enough to take the town back. Not like Plymouth. They did take Plymouth back. Okay, we'll get into that. So it is amazing that they were there that long, so close to Richmond. In New Bern, this was Burnside. He was the leader of the expedition, and he had, on this expedition, he had 7,500 infantry and 3 boat houses. There was a boat that was on wheels, and they carried these off the ship and all the way up to New Bern from where they landed. And the Union only had the 3 cannons to fight the battle, but they had 13 gunboats that went up the Neuse River. This guy, Branch, at 4,000 feet, 500 calories, 64 cannon. All right, and he was the commander of the defense of New Bern. Branch survived the war. No, he didn't survive the battle. He survived the battle. And then at the Battle of Antietam, he force-marched his men to save Lee, the late part of the battle, to rout the Union forces. And so Lee was standing around at night congratulating him, they were talking, and a sharpshooter hit him in his jaw, shot him in his jaw, and killed him instantly. So he died, that's why he died of Antietam. This is a Sneeden map of the Battle of New Bern. This is all hand sketched, and I put stars where the two units were located. The 25th Mass was along the Neuse River, opposite the Fort Thompson, and you can see all the cannon emplacements all along here. And then the 21st was here, and then they were facing this cannon. And then this was all swamp, so they had to charge through swamp in order to get it. The Confederates had cut a lot of trees down in front of so that the Union troops had to climb over them in order to get there. So it's pretty amazing. Now I took that map and I kind of rotated it 90 degrees to show you. So here's the 25th, alongside of the Neuse River. There's Burnside's fleet coming up, and they start shelling Fort Thompson, and they could reach in as far as about the middle of the battlefield. And then this is the 21st. This was the location of the flags. Now, the 21st was the one that initiated the charge into New Bern, into the battlefield at New Bern. They faced the, I think it was the 20th or 23rd North Carolina volunteers. Big difference between infantry and volunteers. A volunteer doesn't get paid, okay? And you're in a battle. If you're not getting paid and somebody charges you, what are you gonna do? Run. Exactly. That's what they did. They folded back. All these people saw them running, and they just followed suit. And then this all came. And the battle was over late in the afternoon.
What year was this?
62.
Okay, so we've got the Union Army
Yep.
south of the Confederate Army.
Yes, yeah, 103 miles south of Richmond.
Wow, did they get there over land, or did they get there
No,
via
by
the
sea.
ocean?
By sea.
Okay, by the snake.
Yeah.
The snake brought them.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Now, when you think about Gettysburg and all that going around
No,
and
that was,
stuff.
yeah.
Getting, but, yeah, okay. So
Oh,
103.
How do I get this back?
David,
There you go.
Oh, all right, sit down, Dave. Sit down.
I just had to stand up and
It knew I wasn't happy.
The Burnside expedition was 100 ships. It's on a map of 100 ships. And I don't know, he had all these regiments. He had horses, he had guns, he had ammunition, and you're going to see a little bit more in my heroine. But they had, most of them were side wheelers back then, and they were towing barges. And on the barges were the supplies and horses and whatnot. So this, logistically it was incredible. This is Mr. Whitford, and his name is on. He put his name on the flag. He wasn't very vain, right? He did survive the war, and He did make a couple attempts on taking back New Bern, but again, they didn't have the forces to do it, so it was just in vain. But he did survive the war, and that's his flag. So the Battle of New Bern ends up like this. The Union lost more men. You know, you can understand so if they're out in the swamps and the Confederates are built in. And of course, those two guys, the one guy was killed from Leicester on the 25th, I believe. He was one of those casualties there. So all in all, but also they captured the 64 cannon, 1,000 muskets and small arms, 2 steamboats, several sailing vessels, large quantities of camp equipment, rosin, turpentine, and of course, cotton. The South had is cotton. So that was the statistics. So the flags, you capture an enemy's flag, and that's the coup de grace battle. I mean, that's the ultimate, to capture the enemy's flags. And they are prizes of war, believe me. And the 3 flags were brought back to Worcester, and they were presented to the mayor and the city council at the Mechanics Hall, in the huge gathering, standing room only, and they were presented to them. They stayed in the city hall until after the war, and then following the war, they gave them to the GAR post, which is on Elm Street. And it's now a restaurant after we sold it. But anyways, it was called the George H. Ward Post 10, GAR Hall. And this is George Ward. He, handsome guy, he lived in Worcester. He was a colonel in the 15th Mass, which was the very first unit that left Worcester. He, at the Battle of Ball's Bluff, which was the very first battle that any Worcester regiment took place in, they got annihilated. And John Ward was hit with a mini ball just before his knee, and he lost his leg. So he came back to Worcester, he healed, they fitted him with an artificial leg, and they asked him to go out and recruit people for the 15th. Who's going to listen to a man with one leg down, okay, and say, wow, I want to join the army? Yeah, it just doesn't happen, okay? So then, not getting his calling at all as a recruiter, he rejoined his unit. And he rejoined it just in time for Gettysburg. And then on the second day of Gettysburg, 15th was on Cemetery Ridge, and a artillery shell from a Union battery fell short and landed into the 15th. He was wounded, he died the next day. So that's why they built the hall, they named the hall after him. Can you hear me back there, all right? Back there? Okay. So, here are the flags. They were, when the GAR Hall closed, they went to the Armory, which is right at Lincoln Square in Worcester. And these two flags were put between plexiglass and put in a closet. And the garrison flags was in the box right here. And when I became chairperson, I've got a lot of money in the bank, okay? And I'm gonna, the 150th was coming up, and I'm gonna show these because they don't belong in the closet. All right? So I had them put behind glass, restored, $37,300 for all 3. Not one, but for 3. Okay?
They did that in Worcester? That's nice. They restored it in Worcester? Yeah.
For a while.
Yeah.
I would have spent money on regimental flags for the Union, but unfortunately, you can see what happened to them. And these were stored in the Armory under glass, but it didn't matter. And the big difference between the Confederate flags and the Union flags was that these were made out of silk, and they don't stand the test of time. Whereas the Confederate flags are made out of cotton. So what I do with these flags, I got some canisters around cardboard canisters and put one in each, tried to scoop up as much of the material as I could, match the color, put it in the bag, and we brought them down to the State House in Boston, and that's where they are today. So we got, they're in a rusting place. It's good. So here I am. This is Grafton. This would be awesome. I had one of the Fort Thompson flag right there, and I'm talking, and here's the flag, and you can't get it any better than that. I mean, so anyway, and that was one of the things during the 150th. That's the same flag at the public library, Worcester Public Library. It stayed there for many months. The Freedom Victory flag ended up at the Worcester Museum, and it was there for a year. And we had a couple of Confederate reenactors come and stand by it. Then the 150 was over. Oh, I wanted to put this flag at the City Hall, but look at the size of it. It's huge. And it wouldn't fit in the elevator. They wanted it on the second floor where they could keep track of it and watch it. But it wouldn't fit in the elevator, so it never made it to City Hall. It's all unfortunate. So, again, I do not believe in putting historical items in a closet.
No.
For any length of time, okay? Or we just bring them out every once in a while. No. So I made this gentleman here, Russ Haddad. He was lived in Worcester, moved to North Carolina, was an attaché to a senator of North Carolina. So he came back to Worcester one day and he went up to the museum. He was visiting his family. And he saw the New Bern flag from his state. And now he's asked questions, and one thing led to another. He contacts me, and we contact Wanda Stiles from the Museum of the Albemarle, and we get all 3 flags shipped to the Albemarle. And they rotated. Every 3 months they would show one of our flags. All right? Awesome. Oh, you can't imagine how good that felt. There's the Museum of the Albemarle. It's on the huge, absolutely. I've been down there about half a dozen times. I cut the ribbon to one of the to their 150th when the flags went down there.
Wow.
Awesome, beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, super.
The bell. Every ship, naval ship, if you've been in the Navy, needs a bell. Whether the time of day, or call to mess, or call to quarters, or for whatever, but they need a bell. And when the Albemarle was built, it needed a bell. It's a Confederate ship, and they weren't forging any bells at that time. So Baptist Church loaned them their church bell. All right, so they had a bell. This is the Albemarle. It was ironclad, was built in the cornfield, 55 miles north of Plymouth. And it had a low draft, in other words, it didn't sink down into the water too much. And the iron was about maybe 3 feet below the surface of the water. This is the guy who designed it was 19 years old from Elizabeth City. And it was built by out-of-work steel workers and shipbuilders and slaves. And then they rolled it out. I love to put things on a football field so you know how big they are. So it was about 52 feet, 52 yards, and then it was about 11 yards wide. So it was a good sized ship. And it had 2 guns, that's all. Just 2 guns. So this is what it looked like, the sketch when it was in the water. So you can see it had a very low water line. And then there's the 2 guns, and the captain was Mr. Cook, and it was launched in March of 1864. Sealed down Plymouth because the Confederates were attacking Plymouth. They were trying to retake Plymouth. And the Albemarle came down the river, and the Miami and the Southfield put a chain between each one, and they tried to trap the Albemarle as it was coming down and have it snare its propeller. But what happened was that the Albemarle came down and turned into the Southfield and rammed it. Okay? And then it stuck in it, and it started to sink with it, and the back end came up like that. And at the same time, this guy, Flusher, I can never pronounce his name, was the captain of the Miami. So the Miami come up close to it, and as the Albemarle was starting to sink, he pushed the guy aside and grabbed the spring of a cannon. He pulled it, bang! The cannon goes off. The ball hits the iron of the ironclad, comes back onto the and kills him.
Oh, goodness. Oh, goodness.
It happens, right? So what happened now is that as these are sinking, the Southfield gets to a point where the buoyancy pulls the Albemarle out of the hull. This sinks and this goes back to the surface.
Wow.
All right, and then they get down and they take over. It helps the infantry retake Plymouth, the Battle of Plymouth.
Wow.
One other battle that it only had two battles. It took on 4 ships of the Navy, Union Navy, damaged every one of them. It suffered no damage to itself. And that was on May 5th, 64. So they skedaddled, and the Albemarle came back to Plymouth and got the dock and never left the dock after that. Until this gentleman, Mr. Cushing. Mr. Cushing was a dropout from the Naval Academy. He was a prankster, a jokester, you name it. And they asked him to leave. So, but that was before the start of the Civil War. But then when the war started, they asked him back because they needed officers. Okay, so he did, and he graduated and became a lieutenant. He had a grudge against the Albemarle because Flusher, again, I don't know if say his name, was his buddy, his drinking buddy from the academy. And so he was going to get the Albemarle, whatever the cost. So he convinced the Navy to buy 2 picket boats, and they came in from New York. And they came down the coast, and one of the boats had some mechanical problems. They put into Virginia, and the Confederates captured it. So he's down to 1 boat now. And so the picket boat had what they call a spar. And on the end of the spar, they had a charge of, it was like a torpedo. And then they had a line going back into the boat where they would pull it, set the charge off, and it would explode underwater. And this was supposed to get underneath the armament of the Albemarle. And the other thing he did was, when he made his approach up to Plymouth, this thing was very loud. These old days, the old coal engines, put, 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 put. So what he did was he took the exhaust and he took a pipe and he put it into the water. And so it didn't make any noise. And he was able to get up until he was seen. Now, the Confederates was playing against something like this, possibly. So what he did was they put logs around to prevent from going over. And the logs, unfortunately, over time, got wet, sunk down, so he had no problem of going over the logs and planting the device. And he had 15 men on his crew, 2 drowned, 11 were captured, he and another person escaped. And this is a picture of the actual Albemarle as it sat in the water off of Plymouth. And that's where it was, down in Plymouth, right there. And the Union raised it, refitted it, but never used it. And after the war, they scrapped it for metal. They sold it for scrap. So, here's the bell. Again, a prize of war. This was really, really something, just like a flag. The bell, the ship's bell was another prize. And it was given to Mr. Horace James. He was a chaplain in the 25th Massachusetts. And would you sit in the front row when he was talking? No, I wouldn't. I'd be out there if that was you people. All right? But in any event, oh my God, he scares me just to look at him. So, what they did was they gave him an assignment to run what they called a freedman colony. And it was, as the Union went in and captured a lot of, shut down a lot of the slaves, the plantations, and the slaves were freed, they all were all sent to the freedman colony, where he, his wife, and his niece would feed them, house them, teach the kids in school, and they didn't have to teach many trades because most of the blacks already had great trades. So the bell was given to him, and when he died, his wife gave it to the George H. Watt. And I read some of their minutes of the meeting. And like men, they fought like hell to where they're going to put this thing. And they eventually put it up on the balcony up here. This was their meeting hall. And they rang it before and after their meetings. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then we put the bell, we gave the bell on a lease, a 10-year lease to the museum, Port of Plymouth Museum, and it was right outside of this where the original was sunk. So it was perfect, for this museum. Harry Thompson, God love him, he's a Southern boy. He says, I can listen to that man all day long, because he got that nice drawl, And the look he gave me when I said, Harry, I said, this is a 10-year lease. When it's up, call us, and we'll re-sign it for another 10 years. And he was 85 at the time.
Wow.
And the look he gave me was, I'll never forget it. And unfortunately, he did die about 3 years after that. And then this gentleman, Mr. Tom Harrison, I asked for the bell back so that it could be at the museum, the Worcester Historical Museum, for the 150th display for a year. And this man drove the bell to Worcester and back again in the same day. So I had to show him. I mean, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah,
But he
yeah.
did. My heroine, get this guy. How you doing? All right?
Yeah?
Okay. This is Carrie Cutter. She lived in Warren, a pretty girl. Carrie was schooled at Mount Holyoke College in Massachusetts. She spoke fluent German. And she served as a secretary and nurse to her father in both civilian and in military life. And you say military, well, how? But she pestered his father that when he joined the 21st Mass, she wanted to go with him and to help him out. And she, like any child, go away. But she finally got her way, and she went with her father. And their dad was a staunch supporter of John Brown. And at one time, in 1856, he took a load of rifles to Brown. And then sometime, Brown even visited Massachusetts looking for donations and people to join his so-called army. Okay, so he was a strong supporter of John Brown. And so is this gentleman. Charles Tidd was friends of the Cutters. And he was, he accompanied Dr. Cutter to Kansas with the rifles, and when he got there, he was so interested about John Brown, he stayed there, and he joined Brown's army. But some people say he was in, what do I want to say, betrothed to Kerry. All right, but this woman from Warren that I met at Grafton thinks no way, there's no way that she would like a man like that. No way. So, you can, either it is or it isn't.
Yeah.
So anyways, when John Brown took over Harper's Ferry, he sent Charles Tidd and several other men out to get recruits, either slaves, black people, you know, to join Brown's army, or you get volunteers. But when, he was only there 3 days, when Robert E. Lee, who was a general in the Northern Army at that time, retook the armory, and of course captured Brown. And then Tidd and a couple of other guys escaped, and they went to Canada. And then they stayed in Canada for a while. He went back to the Cutter family, and he changed his name to Plummer. All right, so he wouldn't be associated with Brown. Yeah, Brown's army. Okay, and there was Brown and what he looked like in 1859. Not like that. So when the Civil War broke out, the Cutters and Tidd joined the 21st. And this is a similar ship that they were on. They were on this is the New York, but they were on the Northern. And it's the same size, it was a side wheeler, and it housed 700 men from the 21st in Kerry. Okay? And there was 100 ships in there, his flotilla. And when they came down to Cape Hatteras, this 100 ships got in about up to there, and they stopped. And the reason they stopped was because the draft on the Union ships was too deep to go over what they called the swash, which was sand that had shifted with the tides and everything, okay? And they stuck. They were there 3 weeks. And they ran out of food and water, and the diseases broke out aboard the ships. There were storms. So the ship took the fleet took an awful beating during the February of '62. But finally, they moved on and they fought the Battle of Roanoke Battle. And this is where the frigate colony was, but the battle was all down in Syria. Yeah. The general was Henry Wise. He was the governor of Virginia. He put a bounty on Tidd's head. So Tidd, when he got finally Roanoke, he was looking forward to fight. Unfortunately, he came down with typhoid fever. And as the battle was raging, he died. He died aboard the Northern. And Kerry, some of the things I read, Kerry closed his eyes. She was a nurse. This guy here was never at the battle. He was conveniently sick.
Called in sick.
So, after the Battle of Roanoke, Kerry helped her father as a nursing aide, and there was Germans there that didn't speak any English, and she helped because she spoke fluent German. She helped them. And then they went on to New Bern. She contracted typhoid fever and died. Died aboard the Darla. When her father asked her if she was sick, if she was to make it was, should she not recover, doctor asked her daughter several times that she's not, that there were any regret. And she said, surely not. That's what her answer was. And her only last request was to be buried alongside a tip. Okay, which they were buried in Roanoke. And when they buried, she was called this is incredible. She was called the Florence Nightingale of the 21st. She was buried at full military honors alongside Ted on Roanoke Island. And then they were both moved to Newburgh when the National Cemetery came up. Clara Barton wrote a poem about her, called her the woman who went to the field. It's long. I didn't want to put it up there because it's too long. And then her name is in the Soldiers Monument in Long Mass. And if you notice here, this is Charles Coolidge for Ted. And the reason for that is because they were afraid of desecration of his grave in association with John Brown. Yeah. So, we're at Gettysburg. Well, this wasn't taken, she was at Gettysburg, but this was taken. This is the only picture of the Confederates marching. And it was taken in Frederick in 1862 by a photographer. But when he took the picture, he only had on a portrait lens. So in other words, it's blurry. That's why it's all blurry. If he had on a lens to do scenery, it'd be nice and sharp. So he quickly put it on, took the picture, and even some of these guys look like they're looking at him. But that's the Confederates. And then Tilly was 15 years old in 1863, and she was there during the day one of the battle, prior to the day one. And she wrote a book after. And I just want to read you just two excerpts from her book. And it's entitled, At Gettysburg, on What a Girl Saw and Heard of the Battle. Okay? And listen to this, and you just put this in your mind. What a horrible sight. There they were, human beings, clad almost in rags, covered with dust, riding wildly, pell-mell down the hill toward our home, shouting, yelling most unearthly cursings, banishing their revolvers and firing left and right. And then, while the infantry were moving about the town in squads searching for booty, and while we were all standing at the front door looking at their movements and wondering what they were going to do next, I remember my mother, not noticing any in the immediate vicinity, spoke to a neighbor opposite street. What a filthy, dirty looking set. One cannot tell them from the street. You know, if you put that in your mind, and you'll see a bunch of ragged old men that are filthy because they've been on the march, they haven't showered in months, you know, and those same men fought a battle for 3 days. Think about that, you know? These are the ballads of, these are the statistics at Gettysburg. How many were killed, if I'm not. When you get down to the bottom, I'll explain that. That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
35,000 guns were taken off the fields after the battle. And they disassembled every single one of them. And they found that 11,000 were unloaded. But of the 24,000, 6 had one charge, 12,000 had 2 charges, right in the barrel, one right after the other. And then anywhere between 3 and 10 charges right in the barrel. And one gun had 21 shots stuffed in the barrel. think about these filthy, rotten, filthy men standing there in the valley, and for some reason, they don't get the charge in right. They put the bullet in first, and then the powder, it's not gonna fire. If they only put half the charge, it's gonna go, and the bullet's gonna end up around about here, okay? Or if it may have been wet. All right, so anyways, it didn't fire. The gun is useless. You cannot take the charge out of the gun after it's in there. So what do? You throw it down, you pick up your dead buddy's gun, pick it up, you don't know if it's loaded or not, you go through the same procedure. If that doesn't fire, you pick up another one. So that is a testament to the men that fought Gettysburg, both sides, both South and North. Amazing, isn't it? So, and one last piece I have to show you. Before I ask you who's on the horse.
Yeah.
This is a secondary cavalry pistol. It's a 5-shot, 32 caliber Smith & Wesson, okay? And it was carried by the cavalry people, all right? And if you notice, there's no trigger guard, and that's so that they get their finger onto the real quick, okay? It's a top load, so this comes out like that. You take the barrel out. It was rimfire or sunfire. So there's cartridges in here after they expend them, after you shoot them off. The only way to get the cartridges out of this is to do this. All right? Very convenient part. You're in a battle. You're gonna sit there on your horse and do this? Yeah, I don't think so. So they carried other cartridges in another that were full, and they would put them in here, okay? Now, I want you to pull the trigger real slow, as if you're going to do off a shot, okay? Put your finger like this. There's a little pressure plate. Good. Hard, isn't it? Yeah, it takes some effort to do that, and it's just a little pressure plate right here. And the reason why it's so hard is they kept it here. Have a good night. Oh, who was on the horse? Anybody got an idea? Did any of you see it? No?
You look like George Washington. Was it it was tricorn hat, right?
This is what they put on a Confederate casket, a veteran. It's the seal of the Confederacy. And this is what it looks like. There's a man with a triangular hat. He's sitting on a horse. Okay. Anybody know who he is?
Napoleon.
Napoleon? Anybody else? It's the seal of the Confederacy now.
Looks like Lee on his horse traveling.
Who?
Lee on his horse.
Lee? Anybody else?
Washington.
In Washington?
Yes, that's right.
The man of
It's
Virginia.
George Washington. Exactly. He was admired as much as at the South, this South as it was in the North. Don't forget, he was a Virginian, he was a plantation owner, and he was a slave owner. He was a great man. George Washington. Very good.